Hola, yo soy Mariana Carazo, educadora y mamá de 3. Mi objetivo con este espacio es informarte acerca de la importancia y urgencia de un cambio educativo por medio del juego en la educación de hoy.
Y yo soy Silvia Hidalgo, emprendedora, publicista y educadora. Y acompaño a Mariana en este podcast para demostrarte que todas las personas, independientemente de nuestra formación, jugamos un rol importante en este proceso de cambio.
Hola, bienvenidos al episodio número 6 de la segunda temporada. Hoy soy yo, Mariana, encargada de este espacio y es un poco diferente ya que nuestra invitada de hoy es una amiga que solamente habla inglés, así que este episodio será en inglés. Hoy vamos a estar hablando acerca de la metodología Waldorf y pues me encontré a una persona fascinante que tiene muchísimo que compartir y quiero darle la bienvenida. Así que a partir de este momento voy a estar hablando en inglés. So welcome Melisa Nielsen. Melisa lives currently in Jacksonville, Florida. It's actually a coincidence because I'm in Orlando. So we got to cross paths by chance. I found Melisa doing my research online. Melisa is a mother of 5. She's been a homeschool mom for many years, and she also owns a virtual school. So welcome, Melisa. I would love to hear your story.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So my story, let's see, I'll try to edit it down so it's not too long. I have 5 children, and when my older children were, becoming school age, I really was trying to find a method of education that would really work for us. And I knew I did not want to send them to traditional school. So I started doing research, like every mother does. And we go into these deep dives and massive research mode. And I had taken my baby, who is now an adult, but she was about 6 months old at the time. I had taken her by myself to the library. And, when they're in that stage, they are pulling books off the shelf and making it hard for you to research and all of those things. Which one of the books she had pulled off the shelf was a book that when I opened it, it felt like coming home. And I sat and looked through the book, and then I ran home and I called my mother and I said, remember when I was a kid and we went to, because I lived in Germany for a while as a child, and I went to the school. I said, I didn't know it had a name. It's called Waldorf. And she started laughing. Oh, yes, I sort of remember that. So that was sort of my introduction into that space. And my children at the time were 3, 5, and I had an infant, and I just really started to dive into this space. And when I did, I didn't realize I would be where I am now, years later. So I write homeschool curriculum based on the Waldorf method. I train teachers that are in schools that want some sort of, training for their classroom, and maybe they don't want to go for the full Waldorf teacher training. They just want to bring some elements into their classroom. I also own a virtual school that we started a few years ago called Seasons of 7.
And tell me about your kids, because I know how old are they now?
So my oldest is 25, and he is actually on the autism spectrum. And then my second one is 23, and he's kind of funny because he is the child that all of them were homeschooled with Waldorf. He went to public school in 10th grade. And as a curriculum writer, I had a little heart attack at first because I wasn't sure if it was going to go well or not. And it went really well. It was a beautiful experience for him, and it was a beautiful experience for me. His teachers didn't call my ex-husband that lived in the same state. They called me 2 states away to tell me, thank you for raising such a child that can be a flexible thinker, that understands humanity, that is kind. And so those were the phone calls I got for his years through high school. And it's funny because, children are children. So when he was 15, 16, he wasn't super happy about the fact that he was a homeschooled kid. But now that he's 23, he'll tell me everything that I needed to know for where I am in life and for I know where I'm going came from my time with you. because we spent so much time just experiencing life. And that was this beautiful space. So he was my child that ended up going to public school. I have then I have a daughter that lives in San Diego that is 21, and my two that live at home still are 16, just turned 16, and just turned 11.
Wow, your story is giving me goosebumps because that's what I envision. I would love to go fast forward many years to ask my children about their school life, especially since I homeschool as well. And it is so refreshing to hear somebody with such an experience, and you will be able to share with us a lot, because some of the questions that I have for you today, you will probably have already experienced them in life. So this is fascinating. So I know it's very hard for you to summarize what Waldorf is, because probably um, you have so much knowledge about the topic that it's hard for somebody who loves and is passionate about
Sure.
what you do to summarize in a few minutes. But we have people here who probably have no idea or very limited information about Waldorf. So can you tell us, what is Waldorf approach to education, and what are the most important aspects?
Absolutely. So years ago, somebody said to me, "You need an elevator speech." And I said, "What's an elevator speech?" He said, "You need to be able to explain to somebody between floor 1 and floor 5 what Waldorf is." And so I took a lot of time really thinking about this piece. So to distill it down, Waldorf is age appropriate content at the right time. That is the shortest space I can give that. If we look at it a little bit broader, Rudolf Steiner, the father of Waldorf education, he wanted the content that was brought to the child to meet them at their soul, to meet their soul level. So if we look at a child that's 5, they're much different than from a child that's 10. If we look at a child that's 5, they're different from a child that's 7. So the content that we give to each child at each stage is driven by their development and driven by where they are spiritually, emotionally, where they are intellectually, all of those pieces. So that is really the essence of what Waldorf is. The other portion is living lessons. So there are no textbooks in Waldorf. There are no workbooks in Waldorf. Everything is given given by the teacher or the parent, depending on if it's in the school or at home. So that teacher or parent has to really bring that content living inside them. So you have to understand what the Spanish Revolution was. You have to understand or the French Revolution was. You have to understand what the Renaissance was. You also have to understand how to introduce the ABCs in reading. You have to understand all of those pieces. So what's beautiful about Waldorf in a school setting is generally a teacher stays with them from 1st grade to 8th grade. So they really get to know the child, and the teacher then gets that piece of progression of the material. At home, we're with them all the time. I had a teacher say to me one time, "I don't know how you do it. At the end of the day, I get to turn off the light and shut the door. You get them all the time." I said, "I know. That's why we take a lot of breaks."
I agree. What do you mean by the right time?
That's a very good question. So we have a view of development that really brings the content to the child in a space where they're having the right material for their intellect. So, I often have parents say to me, "Why is it so bad to watch, to watch the news with my child?" And I say, because you're bringing these things to them that they don't have any context for, and they don't understand the abstract nature. And a young child, a child that's younger than 7, they see everything as real. Everything is a sense impression to them. So that's why when we do something around a child that's 3 or 4, they want to mimic us. It's the space of imitation. They want to do what we're doing. So, we want to make sure that we are doing things that are worthy of that imitation. As parents, as educators, it is not, there's a great Steiner quote that I will completely butcher, but I'll try to get the essence of it, that it's not about what you do. It's about who you are. Who are you? How do you show up for the children? How do you how serious do you take this walk with them? And I take it pretty serious, like probably more serious than most. I'm a little uptight about some of it, but I watch everything, like everybody else does, about what's going on in the world. And I think, oh, if we could just bring children what they need at a developmental pace, that would be so beautiful. I don't know how some Spanish speaking schools are, but in America, often they will bring U.S. history in 3rd grade and 4th grade and in 5th grade. That makes no sense. A 9-year-old can memorize the states, sure, but doesn't have context for how the country was built, doesn't have context for any of that. In Waldorf, we bring it when a child is truly ready. So there are pieces that are layered in. We might layer in understanding where each of the states are in 5th grade. And then understanding a little bit more U.S. history in 6th grade, not a lot, but we don't bring like heavy concepts, slavery, Trail of Tears. We don't bring that to an 11-year-old. We bring that to a 14-year-old who is just waking up to their intellect and just realizing that the world is complex and wow, not everybody is who I think they are. And so that's the space that I truly love about Waldorf education, that we're bringing the right content at the right time.
So basically, you're talking about developmentally appropriate practices. You're talking about following the child. You're talking about child development. So you're basically talking about listening to the child.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so interesting because now I have hundreds of questions here.
Yep.
And you're talking about standards. You're talking about content. You're talking about a lot of important information.
Mm-hmm.
And people often think about all these alternative methodologies as hippie happy schools,
Right.
or as places where children just do whatever they want.
Right.
There's not a line, there's not an information, but from what you're describing, it sounds to me that actually Waldorf teachers need to study even more, because in order to live and in order to understand all content to a higher level, you need to study and understand every single part of curriculum. And to me, Melisa, that does not sound like something crazy. It sounds like something that all educators should be doing in order to enjoy and love what they do. Because often, and I'm here like jumping all over the place with my questions, but we have traditional education. We're given, as educators, we're given a list of topics to cover, especially as you were mentioning, per grade level, because we just have to cover a certain number of topics per school year, and that's it. You have to do it, you cover it, and you never think about what the child is going to enjoy, what the child is going to love doing. And these teachers end up teaching so much, feeling so overwhelmed that very often they don't even understand what the standards mean. And once again, I'm an advocate of standards, because I don't think that the standards are the problem. It's how we transfer the standards to real life.
I agree.
And you're telling me that in Waldorf education, you transfer these standards by living them and by actually enjoying the content through hands-on experiences. So you're mainly talking about developmentally appropriate practices and loving what you do and what you learn. I have various questions here before we move on into making connections to the 21st century education and traditional education. Can you tell me more about Steiner? When did Waldorf started, so that we can have some context about the timeline?
Absolutely. First, I want to hop back to what you said about standards, though.
Okay.
So a few years ago, I embarked on a project because I was really tired of people saying to me, "Oh, but I have to meet the state standards." So I took the most popular standards in the United States, the Common Core. Now, there is a difference between the Common Core curriculum and the Common Core standards. I took the Common Core standards and I put them up against what we do in Waldorf. Every single thing matches. It matches in a different way than, of course, the Common Core curriculum or a regular school curriculum, but every single thing matches. I know those standards are really important to some people. And, you know, as a mother of 5, I've been through it enough times. I'm like, I don't care about the standards anymore because I know that what I do works. But I know that they're really important to some people. So I embarked on that project to really make sure that I could say, well, this is how we made it in Waldorf. This is how we take care of that. You're giving your child flashcards. What if I told you that was like a waste of your time? What if I gave you things to do that actually help them learn?
And you know what? I'm going to interrupt you right here, Melisa, because it's so funny because my play-based curriculum is based on the Common Core standards plus things that I add. And every single Common Core standard is seen as an opportunity for learning. And I've discovered that most of the time, teachers are giving these standards and they apply them without knowing what they really mean.
Right.
And they're very complex sentences, and
They are.
sometimes they embed so much information that at the end of the day, in every single educational world, if you're a good professional, you will meet the Common Core standards. And you probably say, I'm not going to care about standards because you already know them by memory and you're doing them while you
Right.
teach. And I can relate to you with the standards because once you become knowledgeable about what you have to teach, because I agree, there are things that children explore and discover, but there are also things that they need to be taught. Mm-hmm. And we cannot cover the sun with a finger here because there are things that we need to tell them and that they need to learn. But it all has to make sense. And I'm going to use the same example that you did. Not the same exact example, but like fractions and money. So the Common Core comprehends a lot of these standards, a couple here in kindergarten, a couple in first grade, a couple in second, and they're just there in like standing in isolation, probably thought to be developmentally appropriate towards what they can learn per school year. It doesn't add up. So what I do in my program is that I merge them all, and when they're in second or third grade and they have enough information about numbers and operations and a greater sense of comprehension, I present those topics and we have fun shopping. We go to the supermarket. So money is actually something we can live, understand, rather than just memorizing coins. So what I'm thinking here is we all go down the same path. Let's call it, in this season, we've been talking about Montessori and Pickler, and we will be talking about Reggio, and we talked about an experiential approach in Paraguay. And at the end of the day, we take education to the next level. And sometimes people have difficulty seeing that the enjoyment of the learning process is what matters rather than just memorizing something to pass a test.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Well, I already jumped all the way down to the.
No, that's okay. I was thinking about where's the burden? The burden, we are often putting the burden in a place that it probably is misguided. So I beg the teachers in school systems to say, what is it at the end of the day that you need me to teach? Okay, great. Now that I know that, I'm going to do it my way. As long as the information gets to the child, the curriculum, it's about asking the question. Are you concerned about the standard? Or are you just concerned about the curriculum and passing tests? If you're concerned about the standard, I'll help you with the standard. And that's the piece that I think the burden on the new teacher is to go to their administration and say, what do I have to do? And I'll do what I have to do, but then I'm going to do it my way.
And this is so hard because this is where everything starts collapsing. And I see it as the biggest problem. When I talk about rethinking education, I think that we have 3 elements: educators, administrators, and parents. And we are all in the same circle, in the same loop, because parents are asking for performance. They want to see the numbers. They want to see the amount of information that children are learning. Then administrators ask teachers to perform to a certain level. and teachers need to show that performance. So it's very, very hard, and I don't see it as impossible, but I think that by providing opportunities such as this podcast, we are empowering people to learn, to think about their practices, to think about things they can do different. And here's my question to you. So if we have all these Waldorf education and it's not even the content, because probably at the end of the day the content is the same, it's just the way we envision the content. How can you adapt, or how can you adapt is not the right way, how can we influence traditional education to start shifting using Waldorf inspiration? We cannot say they're going to do the whole approach, because that won't happen, but I do believe that we can choose elements from various methodologies to get get to the change that we need in our current educational system. So because I forget once again, how many years has Waldorf been in action? Because we've had these answers for such a long time, but
over 100 years.
We've been blind about them because they were not what we were supposed to have, or they were not what aligned to people going to the best schools or going to the best here and there. And now, and especially with the pandemic and with the amount of technology that we have that helps us get informed, we see that children are lacking all these important skills to become successful human beings, not to recite information.
Exactly. Now, so I would say, even though I said there's a burden on the teachers, I actually think the biggest burden is on the parents. I see so often parents just want to hand their child over to somebody to do it, and they forget the most important piece of being a parent is that we have stewardship over these tiny souls, and we have to take some of that responsibility on. We have to be willing to be partners with the teachers in order to meet the goals. And I do believe that that is one of the biggest issues that we have here. Parents and educators are butting heads rather than bringing them in. Parents are seen as the enemy, and I get it. Like, I run a virtual school, so I understand that thought process. Sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, if we could just educate the children, it would be so much easier without the parents. No. We have to do it with the parents. We have to bring them in. They have to be part of it. It has to be a partnership. It has to be a partnership. And parents have to realize, I am gifting you my child for 6 hours a day. We have to come alongside the teacher, and we have to work together. I think that that's really the biggest issue, is that we have this place where it's pulled apart, and in so many things that are going on in the world right now. It's this becoming aware that together rather than just send them off, whether it be our children for education, for, all kinds of things. I think that we have to be aware and conscious. I spend a good portion of my time as a conscious parenting coach as well. And it kind of goes back to what we said about teachers. It's not about what you do, it's about who you are. Well, the same is for parents. It's about who you are. How are you showing up? What is it that you're doing for your own self-care? How are you tackling that next space? But I do want to answer your question about where Waldorf came from and all of that. So Waldorf was born the first school opened in 1919, and it did not open to everyone. It opened for let me back up. So Steiner was he studied education. He was a tutor, and he was approached by a man who owned a cigar factory who wanted education for the children of the people that worked at the cigar factory. So the first school was that school. That's where actually the name Waldorf comes from. It was the Waldorf Cigar Factory. The method is really called Steiner. And so, but, in America, they're called Waldorf schools. Other places in the world are called Steiner schools. It's the Steiner Waldorf approach. But Steiner died in 1925. Some of the schools were closed during World War II, but we have just celebrated 100 years of Waldorf education. And there are definitely educators that are asking this question, like, does Waldorf still matter? And it does matter in a huge way. Like, almost more now than it did then, because we have so many other distractions today, so many other things to send children to, or to just put a Band-Aid on education. And I think a lot of times parents put a Band-Aid on education. Okay, well, I don't have to think about that now. They're going to the best school, rather than how can I be in partnership? But that's part of our stewardship as parents, is to sort of be in partnership.
I agree completely. I agree, because sometimes it's easier just to forget about the whole thing and just
But they're not dogs, so we have to approach them as these souls that have been entrusted to us.
I agree. And especially with your expertise now that you're training educators, which I love, because I think it's a great thing to do. And I want you to know that Melisa trains worldwide. So all of you who are listening from even Spanish speaking countries, and
As long as you speak English, we're okay.
as long as you speak English, you're fine. Because I know that her work is just fascinating, and she's all over the world. And I think that's a good start. Because I have a question for you, Melisa. Do you
Yeah.
need to be 100% Waldorf oriented to be able to actually take this information into your class setting, thinking about this? How can this be incorporated into the 21st century education? How can we use Waldorf as a bridge? How can traditional school teachers actually start learning about Waldorf and merge that into their classrooms?
Absolutely. So it's a big question. Let me start with, there is training for traditional teachers aside from my training. There is true Waldorf teacher training for teachers that have been in the traditional setting in the United States. I am not 100% sure about outside of the United States. So those teachers would go and they would learn, but it is a small. You go and you get a few weeks, and then you come back and you it's kind of back and forth. So it is, I believe, a lifelong study. So when you start to understand those underpinnings of Waldorf, then you can take those pieces to your class. When we talk about pulling the method apart, in my belief, any Waldorf is better than no Waldorf. Of course, you're going to get the fullness. In Waldorf, we talk about teaching children head, heart, and hands. So we teach their thinking aspect, their feeling aspect, and their willing aspect. So they're understanding all of those pieces. If you were to just change one thing, bring lively lessons, living lessons, get rid of those textbooks and bring a lively lesson. Instead of relying on the textbook to teach the French Revolution, instead, you've studied, you watched all the YouTube videos about it, all the documentaries about it, you have your notes together, and you bring a lively lesson about that. That is going to do more than nothing. So I do believe that as we are moving into this space and we have teachers that want to bring something, I think those are important pieces. Other pieces that I think would be incredibly important that I don't see would be those little nuggets that are important for the beginning of Waldorf. So, on the very first day in a math lesson in first grade, they learn all 4 processes. A child learns to understand addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division in one day. They understand how they work together, rather than, in traditional school, they add first for maybe even a year, and then they subtract for a year, and then they bring the others. The problem with that is, and it's a problem for people that are my age, I'm 49 as we're recording this. I had so many gaps with mathematics in my life because I didn't see they all work together. There were 4 processes that work together. They're friends. You have to have one in order to have the other. And so because we bring those things in a Waldorf setting, at the very beginning, a first grader understands division. And often that is not the case with a first grader in traditional school. It takes them time to get to that place. But when we make it fun and playful, it makes it easy for a child to take it in. So yes, there are definitely small aspects like that. The Waldorf approach to reading, I think, is a beautiful approach to reading, teaching a child to read when it's age appropriate. So 7 or nearly 7. So often I'll have people say, I'm having so many troubles getting my child to do this hooked on phonics or reading in 100 easy lessons. And the first thing I ask is, tell me when your child turns 7. Oh, in about 2 years. I go, well, then you should just go play. Go play right now because your child is not ready for academic learning yet. And I do think that, I used to think it was just American culture, but I do think it's a worldwide culture as far as we're all so anxious to make sure that they have everything they need. When we forget that everything they need comes from us in that space of we're their first teachers, and we have everything they need inside us to bring them when it's appropriate.
I completely agree. And we, as I always say, play is free. Play is everywhere. You don't need to buy things for children to be able to
Nope.
play. And to wrap up this episode, I think that the Waldorf approach itself, it's beauty to the eyes. Of course, I like respecting the methodologies 100%. So I always say, if you're doing something um, to its largest extent, that's
Absolutely.
how it will work best.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to be inspired by the approach, like we were talking, it won't do harm. It will only help you grow. And I believe that by taking information from all these different methodologies that we've been talking along this season in the podcast will help people understand that even though, and educators and parents, even though they don't do each methodology to its 100%, learning about them, taking some of the practices
Mm-hmm.
in these methodologies is the easiest way to rethink their educational practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree.
And all these methodologies are the beginning of finding answers to developmentally appropriate practices and teaching children for the 21st century, children that are willing to rule this world and who need skills that the traditional school system is not giving them.
Absolutely.
So, to wrap up the episode, I would love you to inspire us with um, something that goes in your heart around Waldorf.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So no, I think when somebody starts to Google Waldorf, you get all of the pretty. You started talking about the aesthetics of Waldorf, right? In Waldorf, I call that fluff. It's the fluff. It's the extra. It's the dollop of whipped cream on top of a already amazing pie, right? So it is that part is beautiful. But if I can inspire or have anybody take something away, it would be look beyond the fluff and look at the underpinnings and really take the time to get to know your child. Take the time to understand your stewardship and get clear on what it is that you want for your family, on what it is that you want for your child's education. And remember that we're not raising children, we're raising adults. So if you look ahead to that, 10 years ahead, 15 years ahead, 20 years ahead, what will it look like then, and what dreams do you hope you will have been able to instill in them? And remember that there will be times that we don't have anything in common and we still have to figure out how to parent them consciously. We still have to be in that space um, of taking that stewardship, that mantle to prayer and meditation and understanding what that bigger picture is. So with regards to Waldorf, my prayer would be that you, as you look into it, you take the time, because there are some crazy things on the internet about anything. You can find all sorts of things. So take the time to actually read Steiner, to actually read about people that are writing about his work. So, I would say you wouldn't ask somebody who has never driven a car about driving a car. You wouldn't ask them oh, I see you've only ridden a bike. Tell me about driving a car. So I ask people that when they're researching, not just Waldorf, but anything, that you actually go to the source and understand what it is the source was trying to do with regards to their method. And again, no matter what it was, whether it be driving a car or teaching with Waldorf.
Well, thank you, Melissa, so much. I'm going to be linking on this episode your Instagram account, which is
Thank you.
Waldorf Essentials.
Mhm.
I'm also going to add your website to the virtual school, and whatever other resource that you want to share
Great.
with us, we can link it to the episode.
Perfect. Thank you.
So thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.